I'm an illustrator in 12-Step Recovery. I've been working on a series of drawings illustrating words from the original Alcoholics Anonymous big book, which was written by Bill Wilson in the 1930s. The text of that book has remained unchanged. And in many cases, I've been looking up the meanings of those words in a dictionary, but as I went through later, I was looking and noticing how many times he would use a metaphor or an example, you could call it, to try to make his point. And at one point, he talks at some length about the passengers of an ocean liner which sank. That was still fairly recent news, I think, when he was writing the big book. Was that the Titanic uh, had sunk at sea, and it was just this unimaginable, unanticipated disaster. But his point was, we are like the passengers of a great liner. The moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Now, that sounds pretty cheerful. And again, this is unlike his other metaphors. Bill Wilson really goes on about this one for several paragraphs. He's trying to make a very important point that people who are caught together in what he calls a calamity, a major disaster, become closer to each other, whereas in another situation, like a social situation, they might keep their distance and be distrustful of each other. So that's fine. He said we are like passengers of a great liner, the moment after rescue, when camaraderie, which is a feeling of closeness, joyousness, and democracy, which is the feeling that everybody's equal, pervades the vessel. That means it goes throughout the vessel, all the way from steerage, where what we now would call third-class passengers, the people who had the cheap seats, if you will, on the ship, all the way up to the captain's table, which on a luxury liner, the captain's table is absolutely reserved for the top, very important people on the ship. But once the ship sinks, everybody's in the water together, and their fate is now bound to each other. Now, to illustrate this point, I actually did some research. I went and looked at some actual photographs of uh, lifeboats from the Titanic containing people that were rescued. So we had photographs showing the very moment in time that Bill Wilson was describing when he said everybody is, what did he say? They're experiencing joyousness. But you know what? When I looked at those pictures, look closely at my drawing. The people in the pictures, for the most part, didn't look joyous at all. They didn't look joyous. In fact, they looked grim. They looked like people who'd just seen their loved ones die. They looked like people who'd just gotten dragged out of the deathly cold water. They looked like people who'd seen corpses floating all around them in the water and who were clinging to life on the edges of the boat. This wasn't a joyous photograph of joyous people. I put one guy in here because someone's bound to stand up and say, "Yay, you found us." But my point is, the reality was different than what Bill described. It was a very grim experience. And so I wanted to show this because the stereotype, unfortunately, whenever you see 12-step groups portrayed in the media or on TV, they look like this grim bunch of people in a circle of chairs in a gymnasium saying, "Hi, I'm Joe." Everybody says, "Hey, Joe." They just seem so grim. You just think, man, I am never going to a 12-step meeting. It looks like a funeral. I think there's a message here. I see a message here. Don't expect people to be jumping up and down with happiness if they just escaped a grim, long, slow descent into death. and they just realize they've been spared. You'll see more at 12drawings.com. Thanks so much for listening.